I go for vocal lessons every Friday. That's my therapy. And so for the last 2 weeks, my vocal coach, Ulebu, she's been teaching me, I don't know if you know it, Ivai. And so I see now, no, it happens when you're nervous. So thank you very much. And thank you to witech Africa. My name is Uwabo. And growing up, I used to be asked, what is Wabo short for? When it's complete, what is it? And I would always say, you know what? It's complete. And then they'd say, okay, fine. So what is the meaning? And I would say, then I ask my mama. And then she's like, I would too. Just tell them it's theirs. And then as I grew up, for me, that was a self-seeking, self-discovery process that started from a very young age. So then I started paying attention to, when am I called? I'm called when something is broken. Waba, something's broken, something's to be fixed, and chances are I broke it. The next time so I went to a boarding school, and I used to be gated a lot of the time. So gated is the highest form of punishment. So imagine in prison, solitary confinement. And the only time that I would be called upon is if there's a mathematics Olympiad. So imagine Sean Connery in the movie The Rock being transported out of when you're gated, you sit in a room alone with your thoughts, being transported, you go right to whatever they need me to do, and back again. The third time that I was called, it was by the government. There was a scholarship and there was a pilot program between the South African government and the government of Malaysia. And each year they would send 10 students to study IT and engineering. Now the stakes were high. Failure was not an option. And I was called. And then I started to see a pattern. I don't think that I mind not being called when we're planning, because I've never seen a bad plan. I get called when the rubber hits the road. So when I was called today, first problem I had was I've never actually sat awake through a keynote speech, so I didn't know how I was going to do it. But it also told me that it is a time of action. It is a time of action. It is a time where not only are women speaking, articulating. When women use the word unequivocal, unapologetic, unrelenting, that woman is tired. And change is around the corner. So I'm here to talk about just 3 things that speak to the accelerators of that change. The first one, and I joined Centec, I think it was in just after the World Cup, 2010, 2012, yeah. And that's when we started talking about public-private partnerships. Some were successful, some were not. But we saw the response to COVID. We saw the response to the Eskom crisis. We saw the response to logistics. We saw the response to crime. Private sector put funds aside. Private sector deployed resources. We are saying, as witech, we want to augment that with incubator programs. What does the incubator need? You already have a supplier enterprise development fund. So let me take Centec because I know Centec quite well. Centec would have a midterm expenditure framework, which is every 3 years, you submit that as your plan for the next 3 years to Parliament. In year 2, what you still have there are ideas in terms of goals. What you are under pressure to deliver are this year's objectives. So we are saying you take this year's enterprise development funds, you incubate the resources, and you sandbox whatever objectives are sitting in year 2 and possibly year 3 of your plan. Those that succeed, you scale and monetize. Those that fail are lessons learned for your product teams. Now, funding is not enough. Access to markets. That's what we hear. Black Industrialists Conference, that's what you hear. Access to markets. witech Africa, we have an action from today to create a portal. I think we started planning this about 6 weeks ago. In the last 2 weeks, I've never seen such an overwhelming response of enterprises asking, what can we do? Marvin Solutions is an incubator in Stellenbosch. They work closely with the academic sector, and they are saying, tell us what you need. Do you need access to do you need us to sandbox? Do you need us to write papers? Do you need us? Because remember also as executives, we don't have the time to write. We don't have the time to submit and propose. And they are saying, we sign an NDA, we help you. All the grunt work that you don't want to do, we can do for you. The second area is a portal of all the tech startups in the country that we then facilitate market entry into Kenya, into Nairobi, into Morocco. It is a diamond. When we talk Africa, I've worked for a lot of global entities, and you will get frustrated if you try and tackle everything at once. So entry strategy is important. So when we look at our portal of our incubators, we start profiling them. Which solutions can we pair with which market? I was in Nairobi, I think 2 months ago. I've never seen so much South African television shows than I have in South Africa, in Nairobi. They're watching generations from, I think there was still Karab. But that's the demand that we're talking about. The second one I'll talk about is also still private, private and public. There's research material that we have subscriptions to that it will cost nothing to share with our incubators. We can call them incubators, we can call them innovators, we can call them resellers. The fact is they're more nimble because they're not burdened by legacy and red tape and bureaucracy. Because innovation does not live where there's red tape. Last one on private-public partnerships is what incubators look for is, remember, if it's my first 1 or 2 years and I'm struggling, I want to partner with someone that understands that for at least 12 months, I will be operating in stealth mode. There's no pressure on revenue. There's no pressure on profitability. I am in stealth mode. The numbers tell us that in 2023, total investment in tech startups in the US was $160 billion. Same year, Africa, $6.5 billion. It's 1/25th. So if we don't have the funds, we then need to innovate. We need to make do with what we have. And remember, we're Africans. We have been building thermal insulators before we knew before we knew that was the term for cow dung. I'll move on to the next one, which is so a lot of the startups will ask, okay, where is the market going? Where is the demand? What can we start studying in? And I always say, look, the biggest growth, if you're going to talk about a data boom, we're going to talk about AI, we're going to talk about high compute and processing requirements, you are going to need energy. Tulani is going to be on the stage, so I won't steal his shine, but we need to look at alternative sources of energy. An interesting perspective was shared with me, I think 2 or 3 days ago, about Africa, the continent. And they said, so if you understand cosmic forces, the moon, the stars, alignment, beneath the bed of Africa, where the tectonic plates are, that's the richest of all the minerals. Now imagine what you do when you strip that land of those minerals. You're distorting universal alignment. So to the leaders in the room, to the innovators in the room, when we talk energy, the spike and the demand is going to be so high, but it's going to compel us to put back into the land what we have taken. What are those sources? The sun. A most recent one that I've seen is vegetable oil. So East and West Africa in particular, because they're quite rich and they're very close to the equator, vegetation is quite rich. But the issue is there's a lot of spoilage because of the lack of infrastructure to transport from point A to point B. Now, these are the alternative sources of energy that we were only looking at for food. We also talk, in addition to energy, I cannot leave out the security of that energy and the redesigning of our national grids. Because our national grids, we have to have an African energy strategy. Because our national grids are limited by nature of one area in South Africa, it's the north, Mpumalanga. That is where the power is generated. It is then distributed to the rest of the country. So the minute you then inject into the grid, it reaches capacity. So there's redesigning, reconfiguration. And that is the new kind of thinking that we require. Last one on security. Cybersecurity, I think we is well understood in terms of it's very much, directly correlated to the growth of data. So are your vulnerabilities. So as Africans, what we have is language, a form of barrier. So when we start talking regional content and we start talking firewalls and we start talking API security, we can do that in our languages, because then you'll have to learn isiXhosa if you want to. penetrate my community's data that we are using for ourselves. But then the monetization of that is that whatever works locally can be scaled, and then it's a matter of interpretation. And then we are interpreting from one native language to another, because the beauty of language models is that for Africa, the base is the same. The last topic, it's I made this one the last topic because it's going to get me booed off stage. Leadership. Leadership. Before any boom, whether it's electricity or the telephone, before any boom, the leader pre and the leader post are usually not the same person, are usually not the same generation. You've got divergent thinking. And the problem with the divergent thinking is that on this side of the boom, it's on steroids. It's impatient. A lady who's in the room, I won't mention her name, she told me last night, she said, you know, when I look for a job, I look at the company and I look at the profile and I see how long have they been there. Because let me tell you, if you've been there for 8 years in one position, to me, it's a red flag. And I'm like, okay, tell me. I'm like, okay, okay, what else? And then she says, okay, well, I mean, there was this one company, and within 10 years, I think she saw upward mobility, where she started off in one department and progressed, and then she said, I think that's a company I could work for. So our youth are discerning, and so 2-3 years ago, Dr. Ramani Duvasula, in one of her, she's a well-known psychologist. She speaks a lot about toxic leadership, which is narcissism. Can't remember the year, but the most looked up word in the Oxford dictionary for that year was toxicity. This is a global phenomenon. What I will say around leadership is we need to listen more. We need to listen more. Our children are leaning more towards their creative, native gifts than they are with the ones we have educated them to be. And I will close with the shadow of a leader. The problem with the shadow of a leader, whether it's ego, whether it's, the psychologists in the room will give me better terminology. The problem with your shadow when you're a leader, precisely because of your position, your shadow has the ability to destroy futures. I went to a funeral 3 weeks ago. One of my colleagues lost a parent. And so I get into the house, and obviously funeral, somber, there's a lot of activity. And I realized in that moment, my title is back in Joburg. My position is back in Joburg. I phoned my aunt. What must I say when I get there? And then she says, I'm done. Just say, and she gave me a line, a brief line. And I had to look a widow in the face and tell her, we will take care of your child. So leadership is hard. The shadow is dark. But if we don't revisit it and we don't ask for help in moments where we're feeling we are human, our children can see it. Our teams can see it. And with that, I would like to say, on behalf of witech Africa, For me, I'm all about the action. I'm all about that rubber skidding on that road and starting with that portal where we are registering all the startups and we're creating a marketplace of exchange. We've got Botswana in the room. He came because he heard what we were talking about. And he said, we need more of this. Where can I get this? I'm like, no, there's plenty of it. There's countries in SADC that are saying, okay, there's some APIs we have built. Can we do an exchange? There's incubators that are approaching us that are saying, we have archives of data sets that are already trained. So it is all about action. From cables to coding, from change agent to CEO. Thank you.